we're going to get out of the default look and feel of a website. Okay, so up to this point, we have seen black Times New Roman, all on a white background for all of our web pages. Our links have all been blue and underlined, or maybe purple and underlined. And so today we're going to add a new layer onto our websites. Okay, and so that layer, and kind of the way we think about in web development, and especially with the push from HTML5, and really this was kind of going back to HTML4 even, is looking at ways that on a given website, some of this stuff, on a given website, we're on a web page, we have the HTML, which is all about the structure, right? So it is, and we have been working on figuring out a way that by using correct HTML, that we're able to create the foundation, or really that structure of a web page. So things like the H1 tells the browser that that's a really important heading on the page, compared to, let's say, a paragraph, or using, I don't know, like the small element. I saw some of you use the small element to, again, tell the browser that this content here has less significance to the page, perhaps, or the primary purpose of the page than, let's say, a heading or a paragraph or that list, okay? So we have worked really hard at trying to create our syntactically correct HTML and trying to figure out that piece of it. But what we're going to add in today is a new layer on top of it of CSS. Okay, so CSS is a language. It's just another language that, let me bring up somewhere I can make some notes. Okay, so CSS, it stands for Cascading Style Sheet. Okay, and there's a variety of different ways that this style sheet, or the thing that we're going to have control, are what we call the presentation layer of a website, that in making sure that the content is structured correctly in the HTML, but then we come along and we add another layer just for managing how the page is going to look. And in week 3, we spent, that whole week kind of looking at the structure of a website and really making sure that we've got that structure set up. But also, certainly in that week, we looked at the importance really of relative addressing, right? That we know that we have to get our site structured correctly. Otherwise, there's going to be so much rework the further you go without a well-organized site, just the more difficult it is to fix some of the structural issues of a website, okay? So there's really not a whole heck of a lot of point in focusing on the CSS point until we're a little bit more confident, at least, and I know we're just still at the beginning, but in at least having the understanding that this HTML is really important, and that certainly we have the hope that it's going to be valid, right? That this code that we're creating is syntactically, and it can validate through the W3C validator. Because there's really no point in adding this other layer of CSS if this HTML is bogus, okay? So we're going to look at that today and kind of figuring out how now can we add in this CSS, okay? And in understanding this idea of cascading, there's kind of a waterfall approach, and in your book you can see something like this as well. But there are some default browser styles that are already built in, okay? So, and we're seeing them right now. It's things like Times New Roman. It's things like it's going to be a black font. It's everything is left justified. White background. What styles. We are seeing that things like headings, H1 through H6s are bold, just things like that. We see that unordered lists get the bullet point. Okay, things that are just automatically built in. And anytime that we've kind of talked through some of those things, I've tried to indicate, in fact, that those are things that that we can override because they're just the default. It's just kind of what's set up. Now, the good, the bad, I don't know how you want to look at this, is that not all browsers are the same. Thank goodness we're not all like, I don't know, Internet Explorer or something like that. That we've got a variety of browsers out there. Most of them have these same, right here, browser default values for styles. I can expect that a website, the sites that we've created so far, should look consistent amongst Chrome, Safari, Firefox, maybe Edge. They're certainly getting better in the Microsoft land. But it's because those browsers are standard based. So based on those standards from the W3C, that we can expect these things to happen every time. Okay? But we can override these, and there's kind of this series, this waterfall, the cascade of a variety of different styles we can use. So there's an external cascading sheet that we could use, and this is just it's a separate .css file. Okay, so it's a new language. Really, my goal for at least part of today is to introduce a brand new language. There's certainly some things we need to consider from HTML, but CSS in and of itself is a whole new language. Okay, so it's a separate CSS file, and the goal is that we can link multiple files, multiple HTML files to a single CSS file. Okay, and if we can do this, then the goal is to follow through some of those things we read about in chapter 3 of a consistent layout, look and feel, that kind of thing across the various pages within a website. So it's all about that consistency. Okay. So anything that we would define in an external cascading style sheet would override anything that's in the default. Okay, so for example, if I have content on a page, let's just say our home page where we have our name right now, that right now the page wants to make it black Times New Roman, all white background, all left justified, and because it's a heading, it's bold by default. But if I have an external cascading style sheet that, let's say, changes the font to red, well, then this external cascading style sheet styles would override the default browser, and my font would then turn out red. Okay. All right, so after an external cascading style sheet, there's also a layer called embedded CSS. Okay, so this is not a separate CSS file. The CSS is within the HTML file, except that all styles are defined in the head element. Okay, and it's another approach. I certainly hope to share with you kind of my preference, and it's not even my preference. It certainly is my preference, but it's a standard in that we can gather some efficiency by using external cascading style sheets. But I could also override what's in an external cascading style sheet by using embedded CSS. Okay, so up here, again, today our text is all black. I could change it to red in my external cascading style sheet, but if I overrode that in this embedded CSS model, let's say now I said it's green. So here I wanted to make that text red. Here we know that the text is black. And if down here in the embedded CSS file, I declare that the text should be green, then green wins. if I can say it in a who wins kind of approach. Okay. And then lastly, there is a method called inline cascading style sheet. Again, all the CSS is within an HTML file, but in this case, styles are defined within an opening body tag. Or I'm sorry, within an opening tag, not just the body. Okay, so again, kind of in this cascading approach, the text wanted to be black, and then I tried to override it in red. And then another page, I want it to be green. And then very specifically here, I say I want to make that text white, then white would win. Okay, so it'd be cool if I could draw right here within text edit, but it's a cascade, right? So it starts here, works its way down. And so there's various levels that we can define how the actual content on a page is going to be affected, at least from a styling standpoint. Sorry, I've got a mosquito flying around me. They're so bad. Anyway, okay, so these three models are different techniques that we can use to write CSS. I want to walk through these, and I'm not sure I'll get through all of these today, but we will certainly get started with it at least. Okay. So here's our 4 different models. I don't have to do anything for browser defaults. I already know that part's working. So let me get the VM up here while I wait. All right, so as we start at that bottom piece of the inline cascading style sheet, we know that CSS is a whole separate language. Now, does it have any similarities between HTML? No, because HTML, again, for the structure, we know has all kinds of symbols already. Okay, so in HTML, we know we use less than and greater than symbols. We saw that structure of that we have an opening tag, we have attribute, and an attribute has a value inside of double quotes. Right? We've seen a lot of, these kinds of symbols all within that HTML language. So the reality is that we're not going to see a whole heck of a lot of these symbols in CSS because it is a whole different language. Okay, so instead, you're going to be using these symbols. So those are to the right of the P on your keyboard. Those they're called French braces technically. The left are the opening French brace and the right French brace. I'm going to just refer to these as squiggly brackets. Hope everybody's okay with that, using my technical terms. So we've got our squiggly brackets we're going to use quite a bit in CSS. We use semicolons, we use colons. What else can I think of? There's some dashes along the way. So these are just a very quick look at a file would tell us whether or not it's HTML or CSS. Okay, so we're going to see some of these symbols compared to in HTML, we have that less than and greater than symbol. Okay, so I'm going to go grab my file that we've been working on. Here. All right. So here's my HTML file. This time I've just opened it up in Notepad++. And my HTML file, again, is providing the structure. So starting again at that bottom level of CSS, I want to override those browser defaults. And so at this very last level of the cascade, or the thing that would always win, is that inline CSS. Okay, so something like, let's say I want to change this paragraph. This is the very first one that says this is my new paragraph on the page. So if I wanted to change this page to instead looking like this, black, Times New Roman, all left justified. So here's my very first paragraph. There's all those browser defaults. I want to override this and say, I really wish this paragraph would be green. Oh, we'll pick one. I really want those things to be green. Then I can follow, because here I am inside of this HTML file, I need to follow the standard of HTML. And that standard of HTML, remember, is that we are going to have our opening tag, attributes, and then a value inside of double quotes. So to follow that, if I wanted to style, okay, so style is my attribute. If I want to style this particular paragraph, then I need to use what are called CSS properties. Okay, these CSS properties are the things that can define how content will look or behave, basically. So there's a laundry list of CSS properties. Again, we're week 1. We're only actually going to look at 2 today. And the 2 properties that we're going to focus on today are color, or this week I should say, color and background color. We're just going to modify 2 things. So instead of it being black Times New Roman, I can change it to red Times New Roman, or instead of the white background, maybe I change it to another color. Okay. All right, so our properties this week are color and background color, and this one is the font color. And as you very well may guess, even though it's an early Monday morning, background dash color is the background color. So if I'm looking to modify either one of those 2 things in my CSS using inline styling, I have to first get into an attribute, because that's the only thing I can add to opening tags. So here I am inside of a style attribute within HTML, and now it's looking for its value. And the value on a style attribute can only be CSS. Okay? And so our syntax for creating a CSS styling, or what we call a style declaration, at least within inline CSS, it looks like whatever our opening tag is, style equals, and then inside of double quotes, we list the property, colon, value, sometimes values, followed by the semicolon. Okay, that's our normal syntax for CSS if we're doing inline CSS. Okay, so in this example, I'm looking to change the color. I want to change the font color, so color colon, and then I need to give it a value. And there's probably 5 different ways that we can define colors for the web. We'll see how far we get today. But for now, I'm just going to use what we call the named colors, in that I can use things like red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. All of those are valid colors. And there's actually a whole list of what are called named colors. So I'll go CSS named colors. So there's lots of these 3 schools here. Okay, and this whole list that I'm just quickly looking at under W3 schools has everything, that this, I might call this purple, somebody else might call something like this purple, or, there's just so many various shades of purple. So how do I pick that exact shade that I want? This is one way. This is probably not the most common way by any means that we're defining colors on the web, but for today, I'm going to stick with named colors. There is a whole list of them that are out there. So I'm going to just stick with red. And so now I've completed this, right? Because I'm still following the syntax, because I'm in HTML, I still have to follow that syntax of opening tag, property equals, and then a value inside of double quotes, just for a style element. The only thing that can be inside of that for that value is CSS. So as you might suppose, this one paragraph will be red, but all the rest of the paragraphs will be black still. I'm going to go ahead and save that file, save that change that I made. And then I want to look at this page again within the browser. So I'm going to refresh it. And now I've changed, I've changed that font color from black to red. So if I wanted to modify all the paragraphs on the page to be red, in using CSS, in using inline styling, the process to do that would be to copy and paste, or to retype, or whatever, that style onto every paragraph. So if I've got 3 paragraphs on the page, I could copy that into each one, and now the color of each paragraph would be red. Change that. Browser, refresh it, and now all 3 of those paragraphs are red, but the unordered lists and the ordered list and the heading untouched. They're still black. Okay. So let's assume I had a big, any size website really. If I wanted all my paragraphs to be red, this could be very time consuming, right? That if I would have to go into every single page and add that code in there at every opening tag level, okay? Now there is an idea in all of CSS, move this up higher, that if I want to override the defaults of everything on a page, which by that we mean content below the address bar, then style the body element. Okay? And if we think about that, the idea, bring this back up, the idea of it would be that we've got it's just another idea of the cascading. Okay, that we know that everything in our HTML below the address bar is inside of the body, right? That is the very first opening tag, at least under the head element, and that the body doesn't close until the very end. So everything inside of it, whether that's my H1, I have an unordered list, I have an ordered list, and I have a whole bunch of paragraphs, all of those are children of that body element. So again, this concept of cascading, or really this is what we call inheritance, is that if I were to define something at this body level, everything that's inside of it would inherit it. Okay? Similarly, just because we know that an unordered list always has a bunch of list items inside of it, or it could, and then my closing UL, the same concept could apply to an element such as this, where I've got a bunch of list items that are children of an unordered list. So instead of styling this list item and this list item and this list item, I could shrink that up and be more consistent, more efficient really, and just style things here at this level, at that unordered list, because of inheritance. All right, so let's take a look at what something like that might look like. Okay. So this idea of inheritance. So in our code, let's say that I want to mess with these list items down here. We'll just start with modifying something here. So I'm within an opening tag. So if I'm within any opening tag, I can apply a style attribute. And then again, any of these CSS properties. So we did color. So here I'll do background color. Okay, so this time I want the background color. So the default is white. So if I want to override that, I would need to pick something else. Alice Blue is one of these other named colors that you could see on that website. Okay, so I'm going to change the background color of, let's say, all of these list items to Alice Blue. Alice's, but way to go, Alice. Okay, so if I add that on each one of those list items in my ordered list, save it, and then refresh my page, what do I got going? My paragraph came up here, so I changed something in my code.
Hey Karen,
Yeah.
some of Coleman's students are leaving for a college fair,
Okay.
so we'll be leaving right now.
Okay. It's
All right.
recording, so I'll post it. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just missed some of my double quotes. That's why the page got weird on me. I'm gonna save that. Didn't copy it. All right, so I'm gonna add in my double quotes, and now refresh this. And now, ever so slightly, I should really pick a better color where you could see this, but ever so slightly there is this light blue behind there. Okay. All right. So if all right, so I was then able to change the list item color or the background color on all of those. Well, instead of doing each one separately, maybe what's more efficient would be to take that background color declaration out of each LI and paste and put it on the OL or the parent element. Okay, so in this case, now I'm saying everything inside of the OL will have this background color. So everything within this background color, or I'm sorry, everything within this ordered list now will have this style color. So instead of having to put this on 4 separate lines, really all I'm doing is doing it more efficiently. And let me just pick another color here so I don't, green. It'll be nice and easy to see. Okay, so now I've got a background color of green on the ordered list. Now when I refresh this page, now it's very clear that that whole ordered list, or everything inside of it. So instead of 4 separate styles, at least it's only 1. Okay. So to kind of take that same idea of inheritance and now see what happens on the body with it. If everything is in the body that shows up on a web page, what if I apply an inline style to the body element and change the background color? Let's just go the reverse. So instead of black text on white, let's change the background color to black. And okay, so now you're going to see how we can define more than one styling property per opening tag. Because now I've got on this opening body tag 2 of them. Okay, so I'm following that same syntax that we mentioned over here, in that I've got a property and then a value semicolon. Property colon value semicolon. So property colon value semicolon, and then I can just continue to add them. All right, so now I'm saying everything in the body should have a background color of black. Well, I'm looking on my web page. What's going to be everything on my web page? Well, that's everything below the address bar. So eventually, as soon as I refresh this, everything on here, or really that whole page, will have a black background, and I'm going to try to override the text to white everywhere. Except, if we think about kind of, when I'm doing CSS, I like to have an expectation of what I'm going to see. That way I'll know if it worked or not. What I have to realize is I have other styles defined, right? So what's this ordered list going to be now? I say up here, make the background color black, but down here I say make it green. So which one wins? That's always the question I kind of think of. It's the last one listed. is my kind of mantra in my head. But another way to think about it is the style that's closest to the content. Okay, so in this example, here's the content of the OL, right? It's what's between the opening and closing tags. So here's my content. What's the style that's closest to the content? It's this green background. What color will this text be? I said make it white up there in the body, but down here I'm saying make it red. So this style that's closest to the content, because there's the content, all of these paragraphs should still be red. Again, that cascading, right? So let's give it a look. Now that I've added something at that body level, save it. Save my change. So I'm going to save it, then come over here and refresh it. And now the whole background turns black. My text is white, so there's my name. Now it's a white background. Everything except this link, which we'll talk about that next, everything but this link is white text, except these 3 paragraphs where I said, wait, override that to be red, and my ordered list is still green. So what's with this link? How come that is still a blue and underlined? Well, because again, think about, even though I've overridden everything to say be white, we know that links, so in this anchor element, we know that anchor elements by default are blue and underlined, or purple and underlined if someone's already been there. Those are the things by default. So if we look at, again, which one wins, it's anything that's closest to the content. So in this case, even though my inline styling, at least on the body, says be white, this anchor element overrides it because it's closest to the content, and links want to be blue and underlined. But there's nothing saying that I can't override it right here. I can add that style element back in there. And now I can say, no, I want these to be yellow. Right, so now this one link, its content should be yellow. Assignment 2. So let's go ahead and save it. Go back to the browser, refresh, and now my link is yellow. So that kind of gets us then to this point of inline styling. Now, if we think about, it's cool for sure that we can modify the page. You know, it's always fun to kind of get out of those browser defaults. But the reality here is that we've got a whole heck of a lot of redundancy. Sorry, trying to get my Mac mouse here to play nice on the VM. The reality is there can certainly be a lot of repetition to this, right? That if I really want only paragraphs to be read, then I would have to put this style declaration on everyone. Now, it's one thing if I want all the text to be read. Great, I can just go to the body and do that. But if I just want paragraphs, then I would have to go to each one and then add in how many different pages are on a website. We want things to be consistent. And so now I'm copying and pasting this code everywhere. And then when I'm done, my client or the customer says, oh, I don't like that red font anymore. Now I want it to be Alice Blue. Well, now I have to go in, even if it's a find and replace, I'm going into every file to modify it. That is a maintenance nightmare, right? And not only into every file, but I'm having to go into, in that case, every tag, right? So inline, so some notes that I just wanted to make about inline cascading style sheet is, it is what is closest to the content. So it always wins, if I can make that note. Hope you know what that means. It always wins because it is the thing that's closest to the content. So no matter how many layers of all of this cascading I'm doing up here, we know that inline cascading style sheets always win. Okay? Any of those inline styles. Okay. However, kind of a negative to this is that the maintenance is a nightmare. Just gonna put it just like that. Maintenance is a nightmare because this is at a tag level. Tag or element level. It's always on that opening tag. So if all paragraphs, so for example, just kind of make a note here in our notes. The example is only paragraphs to be read. Well, if only paragraphs are to be read, but all paragraphs, only want all paragraphs to be read, nothing else, I would have to repeat this, right? So there can be a lot of built-in redundancy with inline cascading style sheets. So the maintenance on this, and then I guess every page has to be modified for a change. So again, that example, no more red paragraphs, now make them green. Well, then I'm going through and I'm modifying, a normal website could have hundreds of pages. So now I'm having to go in and modify all of those pages on all of those lines. Okay. But it is closest to the content. We'll give you that. All right. And the very last thing is here, another negative, is that we are mixing the structure, which is HTML, with the presentation, which is CSS. And kind of our best practice, and it kind of follows really this idea from the financial world, that we want to have separate controls, or what we call the separation of duties. That the HTML is supposed to be about structure. CSS is supposed to handle the presentation, and now they're very much mixed. Right? There is a lot of mixture of code at this point. I've got right within my code multiple instances of color red, and it is right in there. It's inside of HTML. Okay. So one thing that we can do then would be to go up into this cascade. If that's here in this inline cascading style sheet, we could use the embedded CSS. And this is really, I think, where we're going to start on Wednesday, is this idea of embedded CSS. So I'll hold off on getting into something new here in just these last few minutes. But it's an improvement, but there's certainly still some drawbacks to it as well. Okay, so I'm not saying that you can't and shouldn't ever use inline CSS. I hardly ever use inline CSS because I think that there's a better way to be able to manage the consistency and the maintenance and just the overall management of a website. Okay, but you can certainly see it out there. All right, so what I'm going to stop there for today. I don't know that that's enough for you to get started on your actual assignment, because I don't want you to do very much, or actually I don't think I want you to do any inline CSS for the assignment for this week. But certainly what you can do is get a start on, going through the material, doing the quiz. Remember, there's a quiz out there this week. There's a website review. And again, I don't know if we're quite ready for the website review, but certainly the quiz and the website review you can do. The website review this week is actually one of my very favorite websites on the interwebs, for sure. It's something called CSS Zen Garden. It's going to be a site. I give you a specific site this week. I don't tell you to go find a site that does something or has something. This time it's go to this website and review it. Now, if this is one of my favorite websites on the internet, it's got to be something cool, right? So spend some time on the website. Figure it out. Let me tell you that you're going to have to figure this site out. If after you look at it, all your only comments are, I liked it. I liked the font. I liked the color. You didn't get it. Okay. So keep looking if that's kind of the thought that you have at the end after looking at CSS and Garden for a little bit. Okay.